ideating for like a client, a lot of it is, how you can frame your solutions or how you can frame the problems that a company's having.
When you're young, you have people bombarding you, telling you, oh, you have time on your side. You're 21. You don't have to have it all figured out now. I sometimes have struggles really conceptualizing that as because I've known what I've wanted to do for so long. I feel like I have to meet certain deadlines that I make up in my own head, but that's not the case for everyone. I got a really good perspective on this talking to Joe Masters, someone who I've been close with since the start of high school. Joe came into college super passionate about journalism. He ran a Nats fan page that had over 8,100 followers on Instagram, and he spoke to Tim Kirkjian, and he took some pre-college classes on journalism. But when he started at Fordham, he realized it wasn't exactly for him and not the career path he wanted to enter. So not only did he change majors, he changed schools. But still, to this day, Joe uses what he learned in journalism and all his media experiences with his new major and new experiences. Why did you want to go into journalism in the first place? I actually don't know the answer to this.
Why did I want to go into journalism in the first place? I think for me, I always really, well, I mean, I knew I wanted to work in sports. It wasn't, I guess, journalism that drew me in, is that I was always, you know, like you, I'm assuming, and, like a lot of our friends growing up, really, in love with sports. And I saw journalism as a way to express that. So, if I had knowledge about a sport or a team or a player, kind of journalism is a way to show that. So like I remember earlier on, like my earliest memory of doing any sort of sport journalism is or any journalism just in general was, I think I remember, must have been like 2014. The Commanders, then Redskins, had a draft, and I remember I did like a really bad Google slide deck write up of every single player and like a scouting report, even though I had no idea what I was talking about. Like spelling errors galore and whatever, but I think it was more so
I
fun.
bet even if you did that in 2024, you'd still have a lot of spelling errors too, Joe.
Yeah, I gotta re-up my Grammarly subscription. But um, I think I just wanted to like show my parents that like passion, and I was passionate about it. So I think I just kind of fell into it, and then I know we talked about it in the past, but that kind of around that same time, honestly, was when had started running the Nationals fan page. And I think for me, it's, you know, I always like asking questions, and I always like telling stories, and I'm, a big fan of listening to stories. And I think, journalism is a lot about that, is how you can, you know, be presented with information and make it and put a spin on it and put a story on it, and present it in ways that's entertaining and engaging. And you know I think you're really good at that, and you know a lot about that, especially in sports. There's, a game happens, but there's so many different ways if you're reporting on a game to write about it and make it unique. And I think that is kind of what drew me in, is just the creativity that was available in doing that.
Yeah, kind of talking about your Nats page. A lot of times I feel like you had some descriptive analysis in there for on post. You'd have like, multiple, images in one post, but a lot of the times it would be like you posting kind of like your emotions. Like there was this
Yeah.
post I was looking back a couple days ago. It was just like a photo of Draymond Green. And I think it was talking about at a press conference. And it was like, the Nats had out hit the Dodgers, but the Dodgers won 3-0 or something like that. Like I feel like in a lot of ways you express your emotions a lot on the page rather than just like was a storyteller. And I actually feel like that aligns with modern media now, which is people are trying to see what people are feeling.
Yeah. I mean, are you trying to say I was ahead of the time? I mean, I'll take the
No,
compliment.
no, no. I think you were just, 17 and honestly it was just easy and lazy, but it looks good now.
Yeah. I think we'll follow that. I think people enjoyed that because, I don't know, it was very reactionary. And yeah, I mean, I guess you see it more now, where at least me still, like, I think if I'm watching a game, it's my favorite team, and something goes wrong or something goes well, I think I just have this built-in reaction, less now so than with Instagram, but I have a built-in reaction to go like straight to Twitter or X and like look up, whatever happened, and see what people are saying. And I think that's just at the time, however old I was, like 16, 14, 15, like if I still ran the page today, I think I'd be doing the same thing, because I think people, I don't know if you feel like that, but if there's ever, a big playoff, I'm watching a football game, there's an injury or there's, a controversial call, like I'll instinctively go to Twitter. And that sounds so bad, saying it out loud, but I think it's just we crave to see what people think. I don't know about you, but like,
No.
And yeah, also if you're ever like watching a YouTube video or a TikTok, I've also noticed like I like to go to the comments. It's like
Yeah.
weird. It's
I
a
think
weird.
there's this like sorry. I think there's this like delineation like between where you go to get information versus where you go to get emotions. Like I'm pretty sure this is the story, but like Kevin O'Connor really caught Bill Simmons' eye from SB Nation when he was a writer for the Celtics. I'm pretty sure this is the right story. And SB Nation obviously is a place where sports fans can express more of their opinions, right? I think if you're going for more cogent and coherent analysis, you're going to go to the Athletic or you're going to go to USA Today or so on and so forth. I think you have to kind of know your place in a lot of ways.
Yeah, yeah, I think 100%. And I think that's an interesting way to kind of split it up is getting your information versus maybe seeking an emotion. I think I would say I try and not get my information from the comment section, but um, I do think yeah that emotional aspect. I think that's why pages, apps, blogs have comment sections because it increases engagement. And I mean, I don't know how successful a website would be or a blog would be or an Instagram page would be if you turned off the comments and,
Yeah.
people couldn't interact with it because I feel like having that option brings you closer to the content.
You're
So,
giving them people just like a place, like a sphere almost, just to like to dump their thoughts in a lot of ways. You know, it's just a prompt in a lot of ways.
yeah, I mean, that's why I think X is probably one of the most, if not the most powerful social media network is because it's almost like it's its own world in there. Like you can, you know, interact with so many like people. I know on Instagram you can make a post and anyone can comment, but I think just to set up the algorithm of how people communicate on X is like unlike any other social media network. I think it's pretty crazy when you think about it.
What was it like to be running the Nats page when they made that World Series run? And let alone at the time, you're 15 years old, and
Yeah.
your followers don't know that.
No, that was always a joke in my family is like I wonder when people would like DM me not nice things or even players sometimes. There have been a couple times when I would, probably irrationally, post in my story that this guy sucks or like I remember, for example, there was a pitcher, his name's Wander Suero, who was on the Nationals. I think during the World Series run, he was really bad though. Um, and he blew a game and I had posted on my story that he was like terrible at baseball and I don't know how, I might have tagged him, but he saw it and responded and like DM me like a thumbs up or something, like something, condescending, but I deserved it. But it was funny because my parents and my dad would always joke, like, I wonder if they know that like they're DMing a 14-year-old. But yeah, during that run, it was pretty cool because, oh, I mean, I gained a lot of followers, but that wasn't important. I think it was more so the fact that, people never cared more than during that time. And I don't know, I think it's cool, I'm as a fan, as I'm sure you know, like you tend to be the most passionate when your team's doing well, and having an outlet to share my thoughts on something I was passionate about was definitely something that was super cool. So, um, yeah, it was definitely a lot better to run the page when they were in the playoffs and in the World Series than when they're competing for the first overall pick in the draft. It's definitely a lot more fun, but it's a different type of analysis. But no, it was a great time.
Did you ever get like imposter syndrome? Like you have all how many followers did you have at the time?
I think like almost 10,000.
Like, did you ever get imposter syndrome being like, oh my God, this team is like, making national news and they're on this insane run and I'm 15 years old, like running this.
Not imposter syndrome. I don't know. I thought because imposter syndrome it kind of implies you don't really deserve it. I don't think I deserved like anything or was given anything. I think more so it was kind of just like I don't know. It was kind of just funny. I thought that
Yeah.
I used to also do Instagram live videos, and I guess I talked in those. So I
They
guess
could
anyone
hear your squeaky voice.
yeah, I had a really high pitched voice back then. So anyone with a brain would have realized that I was, in high school. I guess looking back, it's not that surprising. Like it would be more surprising if like a 40-year-old guy was running an Instagram page in 2018 than a high schooler, I feel like. But yeah, no, it was super cool and yeah, it was definitely a fun thing to have during high school for sure.
I have to ask this and you're gonna laugh, but what did it do to your ego? Like what overall, just like running the account, what did that do to your ego? Because it's an important part of media, and when you have eyeballs on you, it can do things to your brain.
Yeah, you know me, my ego's already through the roof, so I didn't change it much. No, I don't know. I guess I felt, if any. it's the friends that I had that knew. I mean, the only ego thing it brought, or like credentials it brought, is that, if we were talking about the Nationals, I guess it was implied that I knew the most. But besides that, I mean, in the grand scheme of the world, not many people really care. Like my family members care, like my aunts, my uncles, that was cool, and my cousins, definitely maybe good thing to talk about at the time over, Thanksgiving dinner. But I don't know how much it was like I wasn't walking the halls of St. Andrews acting like I was, some global star. It was more so like you knew, a couple of other people knew. Um, but yeah, my ego's already so high that it was hard to raise it. So.
So you go to college and you're going to study journalism, and then what happened? So you go to college and you want to study journalism, and that's your major. What happened?
Yeah, I went to Fordham University out of high school. I was gonna go to Syracuse, but I thought that was too much time withholding Sherman. So, no, I'm kidding. Fordham, I went to it. It's in New York. It's in the Bronx. I thought it was the best opportunity. It had a lot of, I guess you can call off-campus or extracurricular opportunities in journalism, and the proximity to the city, I think, was what drew me in, and got involved in a couple of things on campus pretty early on. I worked in the athletic department and the newspaper, but kind of the big thing journalism wise was the radio station on campus, WFUV. It's kind of the main draw. They have a lot of broadcasters that have gone on to do pretty good things. And uh, I'd say early on, I realized I don't think I'm going to become a world famous broadcaster. I don't think I have that. As you know, it takes a special human being to be able to do that. And I guess, for lack of a better term, I did not have that dog in me to do that for my entire life. I remember they would have you do mock games, and I did a mock softball game of play-by-play, and that was not a great showing. So I figured out I didn't want to do that. Still like doing print. I wrote for the newspaper, did a lot of freelance opinion stories, and then ended up becoming the men's tennis beat reporter. I know that sounds very prestigious, but it was not. I think they just needed someone to do it.
On your LinkedIn, you said
So
varsity.
yeah, men's varsity. So sorry, yeah, like this is JV team. Um, and then I also worked at the radio station. They had a Saturday show. You would kind of get random assignments, working different games, different shows, talking, producing. It was actually a lot of fun. That was probably the most fun I had doing journalism. But the most of my, positives from doing journalism at Fordham came from the clubs and the newspaper rather than the classroom. A lot of my classes were honestly pretty boring. And I remember my kind of one of the turning points for me was I had my introduction to journalism class, and our professor was kind of a weird guy, like fifty years old, wrote for a random newspaper in New York, was always late to class, like always promoting his own stories, which was kind of, like what are we doing? But was kind of an interesting guy. And he asked like who was a journalism major in the room, and me and like basically the entire class raised our hands, and he was like, yeah, you guys don't really have to do this. Like, you don't have to be a journalism major. Which I was like, okay, that's interesting. Like, doesn't seem like, I mean, I thought it was a valuable major. I still do think it's a valuable major, but it's funny that this guy's like, this is who they're hiring to teach journalism 101 is a guy who doesn't even think
At
we
a
should
good
major.
journalism school too.
Yeah, it was a little surprising. I just thought the school itself didn't have a great program for just the actual learning aspect. I know the best way to learn journalism is by doing it, like most other professions. But that was interesting. And then I think just through other experiences, I don't know if it's part of your follow-up questions, but just different internship experiences that I'd had kind of exposed me to working in sports, but adjacent to journalism or not even journalism at all. And that kind of, I guess, opened my eyes to different possibilities when it came to what I could do with my career. So I think that kind of started a shift in my mind.
I want to, I hate when people say there's no money in media. There's money, it's just in different places than it used to be. And it's obviously a very wonky industry, no stability for most people. Did that play a part in it? Like the questions of what's your financial life going to be like and wanting to have a nice life and have time, did that play into, you kind of realizing it's not for you?
I think a little bit. I think more so that was part of the, okay, I don't want to do any sort of broadcast because I remember we had a guy come in and talk to us who was, they advertised him as like one of the greatest students that the program had ever had and that the radio station had ever had, the hardest worker.
What was his name?
I don't remember,
Oh, it
to be
wasn't
honest.
like Michael K or Mike Breen or
No,
anything.
no, no. He was younger, but he had like 3 or 4 years out of college and he was like broadcasting a volleyball game on Tuesday and then a water polo game on Wednesday. And all due respect, like that's a grind, and I'm
Yeah.
sure he'll be successful and all that. And that was just something where I was like, I just don't know if that's something that would be tough for me mentally to get through. I think I think journalism. One thing that's really nice about it is I think, and you may disagree, I don't know, but I think it's a profession where like you really do get out what you put in. So if you're grinding, if you're working hard, if you're, writing all the time, keeping up with your craft and really passionate about what you're doing, I think the money will kind of find you. I don't think it's not like other industries where people maybe seek out, if you're like seeking out salary out of college and maybe journalism isn't for you,
Yeah.
I think
Same.
picked the wrong major. I think it's one of those things that, it's a talent industry. So, if you have talent and you have a work ethic, I think it'll shake out. So I think the more so that kind of swayed me from doing any sort of broadcasting maybe. But in terms of journalism as a whole, I think I just saw more opportunity and flexibility, just with other career paths.
So you've done a lot of stuff in media even since you left Fordham. Um, and some of it has some comm/journalism like laced into it. What are some skills that you learned doing journalism, not just taking those classes, but doing it that you've been able to transfer to over to what you've been doing as and it's the Sports Consulting Club in Michigan, that's what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like what have you been able to transfer over and then also like in the Michigan Athletics Club or Michigan marketing, you're a marketing intern too for Michigan Athletics?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what have you transferred over from what you've done in the past?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing that's super underrated that I didn't realize until maybe I got to Michigan and, had some summer internships and then the consulting group, um, was the importance of just being able, and it's gonna sound really stupid and really simplistic, but the importance of just being able to write at like a pretty decent level. Like you'd be
Yeah.
surprised, even people at Michigan, I feel like the acceptance rate can fool people sometimes. Like there are sometimes, kids that I know, friends that I have that are not great, like are writing emails. And like that's even a skill that I think from journalism, just like, taking journalism classes in high school or just having that practice, just the ability to communicate effectively, I think is important in all professions, but especially going into sports business. It's really, I'm in a class right now. It's literally called, business communication. So I think journalism kind of gave me a leg up in that sense. And then you mentioned the sports consulting group. I think a lot of that when you're, presenting and you're ideating for like a client, a lot of it is, how you can frame your solutions or how you can frame the problems that a company's having. And framing is somewhat like storytelling. And we actually had a guest speaker from PepsiCo, who's like the head of marketing at PepsiCo, and he came in and gave literally an hour-long presentation about storytelling, which I thought
Yeah.
was pretty, because it's literally like, it almost was like journalism. Like he put up like the LeBron, like the side by side, like the one picture on the left is when he made his decision to go to Miami. I'm like, he's a villain, and then the other one's I'm coming home, and like how the two different framing of the two different, at the end of the day, it's two transactions. He's switching teams twice, but just the framing of it makes it, one's good, one's bad. It's two different storylines. So uh, he kind of was trying to communicate the point, and I've realized it now after that, presentation and just thinking about it is that people often they make decisions more so on how you can present data and like spin data rather than the data itself. Like it's way more convincing. I've learned now I'm VP of clients, so like my main task is to get people to work with us. No one's really going to work with us if I just, say how many people in the club, who we've worked with, what we do. It's more so like how what we do can help you guys, like how we can, putting them, in the shoes of, being a client for the club, and figuring out how to frame that information, uh, to a specific person or company or whatever, I thought it was super helpful. And I think that all comes from journalism because, like I said earlier, if you're writing a report on a game, the games happen, like that's a very objective thing, but how you write about it, how you tell that story is very subjective. So I think getting very limited practice in doing that, but some practice has helped a lot because I think it definitely translates over.
And there's also just an awareness of when there's a story versus when there's not, right? Like I feel
Yeah.
like no matter the industry, whether it's, investment banking or business or journalism, you have to know to when it's the right time to put your chips all in. And
Yeah.
sometimes the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Syracuse orange, pun intended.
Oh, my boss used to say that, Warner Bros. That's what he used to say. That's that's something now I say occasionally because he used to say it all the time, just about like negotiating when you're thinking about different deals, like sometimes the juice isn't worth the squeeze. But I was gonna say another thing that journalism taught me, and maybe you can agree to this, is that especially in like the business world, like when you're emailing your boss or you're writing something, to externally, whatever it may be, the importance of being succinct is like you wouldn't even imagine. Like I think journalism, especially sports journalism, it teaches you sometimes how to get straight to the point. I think journalism as a whole does that, and that's super important because at the end of the day, when you get out of the professional world, and you're trying to talk to your boss or you're trying to send an email to, you know, your manager, no, they don't want to read three paragraphs. They want to get it in two sentences. So the ability, maybe for you or a little so for me, like it's easier to put things into, really concise sentences. For a lot of people, maybe without any sort of journalism background, that's pretty difficult to do. So I think I'm definitely thankful for having done a little bit of journalism in the past because that's something that I've realized is super important because a lot of people who make a lot of money or don't have a lot of time on their hands don't want to read long emails from interns or from, entry level workers. So the ability to be succinct, I think, is probably number one, to be honest. I think that's something I definitely learned a lot.
Speaking of your time at WBD, I know that you did some stuff with House of Highlights and Bleacher Report, which means you're working for different companies inside of a company. How did you navigate around the fact that what WBD may want sometimes is not what Bleacher Report may want and House of Highlights? How do you kind of juggle that? Because a lot of people are going to go out of college and work for a Sinclair owned station, and they're going to be working for NBC because they're going to be working for an NBC station, but it's going to be owned by Sinclair. So how are you able to kind of juggle that, right? You've got your boss at site or on site, your current your boss, but then you also have your boss's boss.
Yeah. I will say, the one cool thing, and it's definitely not like, like you mentioned, Sinclair or other companies, but the one cool thing about WBD is that, you know, the like reps, people that worked for House of Highlights and Bleacher Report and TNT is kind of the three main, legs of the business. They were all on the same floor. So there was
Oh,
there
okay.
was pretty solid cohesion there. Like literally, I sat with a lot of the TNT people, but if you like went right, if you kept on going, you got some of the BR people, and then if you turned to right, then you got some of the House of Highlights people.
Okay.
They would all have meetings every day because, especially at WBD, it was kind of like a trickle down effect. So it started at the top with, what sports, are we going to be able to have rights to broadcast? And that was TNT. And then from that, it was, okay, what can, Bleacher Report and House of Highlights do to market these sports on Instagram, on Twitter, on, Snapchat, on social media, whatever it may be. They all kind of work together to do that. But there was something that was interesting was that they really were big on uh, being incredibly clear that there's a difference between Bleacher Report and House of Highlights. Like they wanted to make sure that was one of their goals, and it still is their goal, to build out like their own House of Highlights ecosystem and their own Bleacher Report ecosystem. Because I feel like people maybe sometimes can, from an outside perspective, kind of conflate the two as
Yeah.
well, Bleacher Report, House of Highlights, like what's the difference? But I wasn't in on a ton of those meetings, but I do know that that was something that was a big focus for them was making sure that those were two. Obviously, they exist kind of under the same umbrella, but two different entities. So yeah, I think it was great getting that experience. A lot of what I did was like more of on the production side, just helping out when they needed a hand, just because I was an intern and
Yeah.
something to do was always something fun. So um, that was definitely a fun experience and kind of different than what I was doing just on a day-to-day level, a day-to-day basis. But yeah, it was really cool to kind of get an inside look in how three different teams kind of collaborate and all work together.
How I think this is very important. I know you had players like DM you or comment on your posts when you're running the Nats page, and I know you've spoken to Tim Kurkjian before. I don't know who you've spoken to since you changed majors, but I'm assuming you've been around some really cool people or some people at least that have a lot of power. What did being around or just interacting with such big figures teach you about how to operate in business and kind of how to operate kind of in the communication space? Because a lot of people just go get overwhelmed a lot of the times. I can tell you the first time I ever asked Jim Boeheim at a press conference, I
I
was
know.
yes, you've seen the video, but I was very nervous. So how
Yeah,
did
I
you
would
kind
say
of
that was. I watched it every morning.
oh wow, well then that says more about you than me asking that question when I was a freshman. But what did that kind of teach you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the difference is, the thing I miss about journalism is when you're talking to like a big dog in journalism, everyone like kind of knows who they are because they're more, I don't know if this is a better word than like facey, but they're more like Tim Kurkjian, like, more casual people know Tim Kurkjian than, my boss last summer, although my boss, I would say, is just as influential, or just as much of a, big dog as Tim Kurkjian. But um yeah, I would say since I switched majors, yeah, I think especially last summer was pretty crazy that I was the only intern on my team and it was the business development team and it was basically, working and sitting in on meetings with like only vice presidents and senior vice presidents and executive vice. Like it was pretty high level people I was around and meetings I was in and yeah, it was definitely nerve-wracking. Every time I asked a question in a meeting, it was stadium pulse, my heart was beating. Just because you don't want to seem like the clown in the room. But it takes a while to get over that. And once you realize, I think, and embrace that people around you realize that you're a young reporter
Yeah.
in a post game media room, or in my case, you're an intern. They know you're not going to know everything, or they're not expecting you to be David Aldridge, and they're not expecting me to be, my boss. So. I think for me, it was just being comfortable, not knowing everything and uh, not, being expected to, you know, enunciate everything correctly or know the definition to everything. Literally, the first 2 weeks of my job last summer was just getting caught up on what it's a completely different language. So just getting caught up on, what O&O means, what really are,
Owned and
TNT's.
operated, right? Is that true?
Yeah, yeah, but what that means from like
Maybe I
a,
should change my major.
yeah, there you go. You already ahead of me. Um, knowing, that just because Bleacher Report can post an NBA highlight doesn't mean they can post a 2 minute highlight. There's a minute restriction, second restrictions. There's leagues they can't even touch. All of that took weeks, and that wasn't even getting into the weeds of like the broadcasting aspect of it. So um, I think embracing, especially in the position we are right now, that we're expected to be learning, I think is something that kind of alleviates some of that pressure for sure. And then at the end of my internship, I had to present basically what I did for the entire summer to the team. Like I think it was 10 people in the room and like 15 more on Zoom. So that was nerve-wracking. And I mean, once you do that, like a school presentation isn't that bad, and talking to teachers and professors isn't that bad, or presenting in front of a club is nothing. So. Um, yeah, I've definitely had interaction. My interview last summer was with basically the two guys that are, we're negotiating the NBA rights. And I don't know if you saw today, but TNT just partnered with DAZN or DAZN, I forget which one it is, but um, on World Cup rights. So, and I know like my boss was involved in that. Um, so I think it didn't hit me until I got there. Like, oh, this guy is like pretty serious. And yeah, I think the only way you learn is by doing it and, kind of throwing yourself in the fire, as I'm sure you're used to by, interviewing Mike Budenholzer or Jim Boeheim.
Well, no,
Uh,
no, I'm not interviewing them. I just asked them questions
Ask
about
some
the
questions. Yeah,
conversation.
but I mean, I'm sure maybe it's the same for you that, the only way you've gotten better is just by continuing to do it. And yeah, I feel like for me, I'll be lying. It's maybe I don't know. I'm kind of curious in your role what it's like for you in your world, but you know, I'm still like if I'm in a meeting at a job or like I'm you know in an important meeting with people that are in the professional industry, I still get nervous. Like I
Yeah,
still
of
like
course.
I yeah like I'd be lying if I wasn't, I could feel my heart beating. But I think it's just like having the confidence and learning that maybe that nervousness is excitement, I think has helped. But like, I don't know about you, but when you've done it dozens of times now, but when you're covering an NBA game, you're still probably, your heart's probably still beating out of your chest.
It is. It's more just sometimes for me, it's that you look at everyone else in the room and they've at least got 10 years on me and I'm 21. But
The thing is, they know that, right?
yeah, they know that. I know that.
Yeah.
But I think in a way, though, like you were talking about, it changes the lens of who you are in that sphere, where you're not just someone working to the people around you, but you're also someone who's young. So I think in a way it makes it easier to go up to people and to interact with them. But to go back to what you're talking about earlier, because I think is a really important point, no matter the industry, it's just more about being 21 a lot of the times is I think when you can not only know, but understand and conceptualize and live the idea that you are a beginner and that you're not expected to be perfect at everything, you're going to subconsciously do better at whatever task you're doing. I'm actively trying to learn that in my life every day. But I've just noticed, like, I was working out earlier and I was really frustrated. And I just told myself, I'm not going to get this right. I'm not going to get it all right at once. And I gave myself a little bit less pressure and I did better on my last rep. And you would think you would do worse as the time goes on and you're more tired, but I actually did better. And I think it was because of my mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I think that speaks to a larger, just more so of
Yeah.
a human thing that, we, and it's a good thing. I think it's better that we expect a ton out of ourselves than not a ton out of ourselves. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just how, like you just said, like how you frame it and, um, line it up in your head to where you can succeed. But I think it's good that like you and I both kind of had that mindset of, you want to be perfect. You want to, it's not, I don't think it's a bad thing to be a perfectionist,
No, no.
Great.
Yeah.
It's just how you can frame it, how you can shape it up to, not kill you, like how you can, you know, put it in your mind so it can continue to, you can continue to improve. It doesn't, beat you down. But in terms of being a perfectionist, I know I listened to something, your goat, Nick Wright. I think he was on Colin Cowherd's podcast. I think he said, I don't know if he had anxiety or like he was just, he's just a mental freak. Like he's always on 100 miles per hour. And he was talking about how, like, I think when he was younger out of college, like he could have taken medication to like, help slow it down and, not be so anxious and so, always thinking about work. And he was like, that would have killed my career. Cause I think he stopped talked about how, that, staying up until 5 in the morning at night worrying about his career and his job and his life, like continue to push him to where obviously he's super successful now. And he was basically saying like people try and suppress that nowadays. So I think it's not ideal to do that. It's just how you can kind of shape it up and frame it in your mind.
Last question. What is something that you wish you knew when you started college slash when you started your career or like career journey that you know now?
Oh, it's a good one. Don't go to Fordham. No, I'm kidding. Um, no. Um, I guess I would just say, I don't know. It's kind of corny, but to, I guess, listen to yourself and um, not think like what you're doing now is what you're going to be doing forever, or like what you're doing now is the most important thing in the world because so much changes. Like even after I went to Michigan, I still thought I was going to do graphic design. And like in 2 months, I realized I didn't have to do because I used to think graphic design was going to be my into working in sports, and then I would eventually get to marketing, whatever. Um, and in like 2 months, my career trajectory kind of changed a little bit, or what I thought I'm going to be doing, and since then it's changed again. So I guess it's just kind of like kind of embraced the uncertainty because that's another thing that a person I worked with who's much older than me told me last summer that was like you should be super happy and like really do embrace it at this point in your life. You're not really tied down to anything and you kind of have freedom to do whatever you want. Like when we're 35, 40, like you're gonna have a job, family, like things that are keeping you pretty locked in.
Yeah.
Like realistically now you could go, work in the food industry. You could go do whatever you wanted. Now, so I think the same goes for me. So, 20 years from now, it's harder. So, I still try and think about that. So I guess that's what I would tell myself.
That's a good answer. Thank you, Joe.